I sit here in a quiet room, late in the evening, when the world outside has softened and slowed. The lights are low, the air feels still, and for a moment, it is just you and me, sharing this space of language and feeling. Today, I want to talk about something many of us carry silently, something familiar and tender, yet rarely spoken out loud. I want to talk about the things we keep inside, especially with the people we love the most. I want to talk about why so often we say, "I'm fine," even when our hearts are not fine at all. I want to talk about what it means to never tell your family how you really feel, and what happens when words stay locked inside. I remember a small kitchen from my childhood, warm with the smell of tea and fresh bread. The table was wooden, worn in places where years of elbows, cups, and conversations had rested. Evening light came through the window in soft orange stripes, touching the walls, touching my mother's face as she moved slowly around the room. I was maybe 10 years old, sitting with my feet swinging just above the floor, not quite tall enough yet to rest them comfortably. My father was at work. My older sister was in her room studying, and I was pretending to read a book, though my mind was somewhere else entirely. My mother turned toward me and asked, in that gentle way only mothers can, "How was your day?" It was such a simple question, the kind of question asked in homes all over the world every single evening. But in that moment, it felt heavier than it should have been. I looked down at my book, at the small black letters that seemed to blur together, and I felt a tightness in my chest. My day had not been easy. I had been teased at school for my accent, for being too quiet, for not knowing how to answer quickly enough in class. I had felt small, embarrassed, and strangely alone, even in a room full of children. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say that I felt hurt, that I wished I could disappear, that I wished I could speak more confidently, more smoothly, more like everyone else. I wanted to say that I felt like I did not quite fit anywhere, but the words did not come. Instead, I lifted my eyes, gave a small smile, and said, "It was fine." Two simple words, spoken quickly, almost automatically. My mother nodded, returned to her tea, and the moment passed like a quiet wave. Looking back now, I can still see that scene so clearly. The steam rising from her cup, the ticking clock on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator. I can feel again the weight of those unspoken feelings sitting inside me, heavy yet invisible. At the time, I did not have the language to explain what I was feeling, and perhaps even if I had, I might still have stayed silent. There was something in me that believed it was better not to worry her, not to burden her with my small pains. I told myself that she had enough to carry already. As I grew older, that habit followed me quietly, like a shadow that never quite leaves your side. In my teenage years, when friendships became complicated and self-doubt grew louder, I continued to answer with, "I'm fine." When my father asked about school, when my sister asked about my mood, when relatives called to check in, I wrapped my true feelings in polite, simple phrases. "I'm okay. Nothing much. Same as usual." Each time, I felt a small distance open between my inner world and the people who loved me. Years later, when I was living in another city, far from home, I returned for a family visit. I remember arriving late in the afternoon, my suitcase rolling across the familiar driveway, the house standing just as I had left it. My mother hugged me tightly, as if she could feel all the time we had been apart. My father smiled, quieter now, his hair a little more silver than before. We sat together in the living room, the same old couch, the same photographs on the walls, and for a moment, everything felt both familiar and slightly strange. That evening, we gathered around the dinner table, plates filled with food that tasted like comfort and memory. My mother asked again, just as she always had, "How have you been this time?" I was older, more experienced, and more aware of my own emotions. I had been struggling at work, feeling overwhelmed, unsure of my path, and often lonely in my new city. I felt tired in a way that sleep alone could not fix. For a brief second, I considered telling the truth. I imagined saying, "I have been having a difficult time. I feel lost sometimes. I miss you more than I admit." I pictured their faces, how they might react, how the atmosphere might shift. But the old pattern slipped in so smoothly, almost without my permission. I smiled, took a bite of food, and said, "I've been good. Busy, but good." After dinner, I found myself standing alone in my childhood bedroom, looking out the window at the darkening sky. The room still smelled faintly of detergent and old books. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt a quiet sadness settle over me. In that moment, I realized something important. I was not hiding my feelings because I did not care about my family. I was hiding them because I cared too much. I was afraid that my honesty might worry them, burden them, or change the image they had of me as the responsible, calm, capable one. As I think about these memories now, I notice how language weaves through them like an invisible thread. The phrase "I'm fine" carries so much more than its simple surface meaning. In English, it is a common answer, polite, smooth, socially safe. But sometimes those two words become a wall, a quiet barrier between our inner world and the people around us. They become a way of protecting ourselves, but also a way of staying unseen. There is another phrase that has stayed with me over the years, one that I wish I had known how to use back then. It is the phrase, "I don't have the words yet." There is something gentle and honest in that. It does not pretend everything is okay, but it also does not force you to explain feelings that are still messy and unclear. It leaves space for truth to arrive slowly, in its own time. When I imagine speaking to my younger self in that small kitchen, I do not scold him for saying "I'm fine." I sit beside him quietly. I let him feel what he needs to feel. And I whisper, not as a lesson, but as a companion, that it is okay to take time with your words, that silence does not mean weakness, and that one day he will learn to speak his heart more freely. In my work now, as someone who lives inside language every day, I see how deeply connected our words are to our emotional lives. Learning English or any language is not only about grammar or vocabulary. It is about finding ways to express who you are, what you feel, what you carry inside. It is about discovering phrases that can hold your truth without breaking it. I think about all the listeners out there, perhaps sitting in a quiet room like you are now, maybe thinking of their own families, their own unspoken feeling. Maybe you, too, have said "I'm fine" more times than you can count. Maybe you, too, have smiled to protect others, even when your heart felt heavy. That silence does not make you cold or distant, it makes you human. Sometimes I feel that we mistake silence for absence, but often it is simply a different kind of language. It can be love trying to be careful. It can be fear trying to be brave. It can be tenderness wrapped in restraint. And yet, I also believe there is healing in slowly finding your voice, in letting yourself be seen, even in small ways. I remember another moment more recent, when I finally chose different words. I was on the phone with my mother after a particularly exhausting week. My voice sounded tired, even to my own ears. She asked, as always, how I was doing. This time, instead of my usual response, I paused. I let the silence breathe for a moment. Then I said, softly, "It's been a bit hard lately." My heart raced as I spoke, but something inside me loosened at the same time. She did not panic. She did not interrogate me. She simply said, "I'm here." Two simple words, but they carried more warmth than any perfect sentence could. In that moment, I understood that honesty does not have to be dramatic. It can be small, gentle, and still deeply meaningful. As I sit with you now, I think about how this theme flows through so many lives, the way we protect our families, the way we protect ourselves, the way we navigate between love and vulnerability. Your English, your words, your voice are tools you can use not just to communicate, but to connect more deeply with your own heart and with others. I imagine you thinking of your own childhood home, your own dinner table, your own quiet bedroom moments. I imagine the phrases that come naturally to you, the ones you use when you are not ready to be fully honest. There is no rush to change all of that at once. Growth is slow, like a river carving its path over time. When we talk about how we really feel, we are not just practicing language. We are practicing courage, awareness, and compassion. We are learning to sit with discomfort without running from it. We are learning to trust that our loved ones can hold our truth just as we hold theirs. And so, as this evening settles around us, I invite you to carry this reflection gently with you. Notice the moments when you say, "I'm fine." Notice what you truly feel beneath those words. Notice how language can be both a shield and a bridge. Little by little, you may find new ways to speak, new ways to share, new ways to let yourself be seen. Because you are not just learning English. You are learning how to notice your inner world, how to breathe through difficult emotions, and how to express your life with honesty and care. Your voice matters, even when it trembles. Your feelings matter, even when they are complicated. I often think about how silence travels through families like an invisible inheritance. Not the comfortable silence of sitting together without needing to speak, but the careful silence of feelings left unsaid, passed quietly from one generation to the next. It is rarely intentional. No one wakes up and decides, "Today, I will teach my child to hide their emotions." Yet somehow patterns form, almost naturally, like footsteps following old paths in the same direction. I remember watching my father when I was younger. He was not a man of many words, especially about his inner world. He worked long hours, came home tired, and showed love through small, steady actions rather than emotional conversations. He fixed broken things, drove me to school, carried heavy bags, and sat quietly beside me when I was sick. He rarely said, "I am worried," or "I am stressed," or "I am afraid." Instead, he carried those feelings in his posture, in the lines on his forehead, in the way his eyes sometimes looked distant after a long day. There was one evening when a storm rolled in unexpectedly. The wind rattled the windows. Rain struck the roof with a steady, relentless rhythm, and the lights flickered. I remember sitting at the table doing homework, trying to focus on English sentences while my heart raced at every clap of thunder. My father stood near the window, watching the dark sky, his hands resting on the frame. At one point, the power went out completely. The house fell into deep darkness, broken only by the faint glow of streetlights outside. My mother lit a candle, placing it gently in the center of the table. The small flame trembled, casting moving shadows on the walls. In that moment, my father turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something softer in his expression, something almost vulnerable. He did not say much. He simply walked over, placed his hand lightly on my shoulder, and sat beside me. I could feel the warmth of his presence, the steady reassurance that he was there. We did not talk about fear or danger. We just sat together in the flickering light, listening to the storm pass. Looking back, I realized that was his way of saying, "I care about you," without needing to put it into words. As I grew older, I began to understand that my father's silence was not emotional distance. It was simply his language, shaped by his own upbringing, his own experiences, his own unspoken lessons about strength and responsibility. And I see now how easily I absorbed that same quiet approach to feelings, even without realizing it. When I left home for the first time, moving to a new city to study, I felt a mix of excitement and loneliness that I did not know how to name. I missed the familiar sound of my mother moving around the kitchen in the morning, the way my father cleared his throat before speaking, the ordinary rhythms of home that had once felt so mundane. I would call them occasionally, usually in the evenings. My mother would answer, her voice warm and familiar, and we would talk about small things, daily life, simple updates. But beneath those conversations, there was always more that I was not saying. I did not tell her about the nights I felt overwhelmed, about the moments I doubted myself, about the quiet tears I sometimes cried in my small, lonely room. One night, after a particularly difficult week, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, staring at my mother's name on the screen. I wanted to call her, to hear her voice, to feel that sense of safety again, but I hesitated. Part of me worried that if I started talking, I might not be able to stop. I might open a door I did not know how to close. In the end, I called. The phone rang twice before she picked up. I could hear the background noise of the house, the faint clinking of dishes, the distant sound of the television. She greeted me as always, gently, affectionately. We spoke about small things at first, how my classes were going, what she had cooked for dinner. Then there was a pause, a soft space in the conversation. I felt my breath slow, my chest tighten slightly. I wanted to say something real, something honest, but the words felt heavy, tangled, uncertain. Instead, I found myself saying, almost without thinking, "I just wanted to hear your voice." There was silence on the other end, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Then she said, very quietly, "I'm glad you called." In that simple exchange, I felt understood in a way that did not require full explanations. Sometimes connection does not need complete transparency. Sometimes it only needs presence. As I reflect on all these moments, I see how our relationship with language evolves over time, just like our relationship with our families and ourselves. When we are young, we often lack the vocabulary to describe our inner world. As we grow, we gain more words, more awareness, more ability to express what we feel. Yet, even then, emotional honesty can still feel risky, fragile, uncertain. In English, there are so many ways to talk about feelings, subtle shades of meaning that go beyond simple phrases like "I'm fine" or "I'm sad." We can say, "I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed," or "I've been carrying a lot lately," or I'm not at my best right now. These expressions allow for honesty without intensity, truth without drama. They create space for conversation rather than closing it. I think about how powerful it can be to slowly expand your emotional vocabulary, not just in your native language, but in English as well. Each new phrase becomes another tool, another bridge between your inner world and the world around you. You are not just learning how to speak more fluently, you are learning how to speak more truly. Sometimes I imagine you, wherever you are, practicing these phrases quietly to yourself. Maybe you sit in your room, whispering, "I've been feeling tired lately," or "I've been a bit worried about work," or "I miss home more than I expected." These are not grand confessions. They are gentle steps toward self-expression. And perhaps one day you might choose to share them with someone you love. Not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually, authentically. You might discover that your family, like mine, is more capable of holding your feelings than you once believed. I also want to acknowledge that not every family makes honesty easy. Some homes are built on expectations, on appearances, on unspoken rules that discourage vulnerability. If that is your experience, your silence may be less about protection and more about survival. In that case, your journey toward expression might look different, slower, more cautious, and that, too, is valid. What matters is not that you suddenly tell everyone everything. What matters is that you begin to listen to yourself, to recognize your feelings, to give them space inside you before trying to give them words. Language grows from awareness, and awareness grows from kindness toward your own inner life. As this reflection continues, I return in my mind to that childhood kitchen, to the boy who said I'm fine so easily. I do not see him as closed or dishonest. I see him as trying his best with the tools he had at the time. And I imagine sitting beside him again, this time older, calmer, more understanding. I would tell him that one day he will learn to speak more openly, that his heart is not too heavy to be shared, that his feelings are not a burden to those who love him. I would tell him that language can be gentle, that honesty can be soft, that vulnerability does not have to be loud to be real. And I would tell you the same. Your journey with English is not just about mastering grammar or pronunciation. It is about finding your voice, about discovering how to say, in your own way, "This is who I am. This is what I feel. This is my experience of the world." When we begin to speak honestly, even in small ways, something inside us shifts. We become a little lighter, a little freer, a little more present in our own lives. We stop living behind polite phrases and start living through authentic expression. So as you move through your day, as you sit with your family, your friends, your colleagues, notice the moments when you choose silence, and notice the moments when you choose words. Neither is right or wrong. Both are part of being human. But slowly, gently, you may find that you are ready to let more of your true self be heard. Because your feelings matter, your story matters, your voice matters. And every time you speak in English or any language, you are not just communicating, you are revealing a little more of your inner world, one word at a time. There is another memory that returns to me now, quieter, almost ordinary, yet strangely meaningful in the way small moments often are. It happened years later, after I had already begun teaching, after I had already spoken with hundreds of students about confidence, expression, and finding their voice in English. Sometimes life has a gentle way of testing the lessons we think we already understand. I was visiting home again, this time for a holiday. The house felt fuller than usual, relatives moving in and out, laughter in the hallway, the clatter of plates in the kitchen. My mother was busy cooking, my sister was helping her, and my father sat in his usual chair near the window, reading the newspaper, occasionally looking up at the noise around him with a faint smile. At one point, I stepped outside to get some fresh air. The sky was pale blue, the kind that feels light and open, and the afternoon sun warmed my face. I leaned against the wall near the front door, watching cars pass slowly down the street, feeling that familiar mix of belonging and distance that often comes when you return home as an adult. After a few minutes, my father joined me. He did not say anything at first. He simply stood beside me, hands in his pockets, eyes following the same quiet rhythm of the street. I could sense his presence, steady and calm, the way it had always been. Then, without looking at me, he said softly, "You seem tired." It was not a question, just an observation, simple and direct. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that he could see more than I usually allowed people to see. Even when I tried to appear composed, he noticed the small signs, the subtle weight I carried. I felt the familiar instinct to smile and say, "I'm fine." But this time, the words did not come so easily. I took a breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, and let it out slowly. I looked at the street, then at him, and said, "I think I am a little tired." Yes. It was not a dramatic confession. It was not a full emotional disclosure, but it was honest. He nodded, as if that was enough. He did not push for more, did not ask me to explain, did not try to solve anything. He simply stood there with me, acknowledging what I had said, letting it exist between us without pressure. In that silence, I felt unexpectedly understood. Later that evening, as we sat together at the dinner table, I noticed how differently I felt. I was still tired, still carrying my worries, but there was a small sense of relief inside me, like a knot that had loosened just a little. I realized that sharing even a fragment of my truth had made me feel less alone. This is what I mean when I say that language is not only a tool for communication, but a bridge between hearts. You do not need perfect words. You do not need long explanations. Sometimes, a simple sentence like, "I've been a bit tired lately," can carry more honesty than hours of carefully constructed speech. As I think about you listening now, I imagine how this might connect to your own life. Perhaps you have your own version of that moment, standing beside a parent, a sibling, a partner, feeling seen in a quiet, understated way. Or perhaps you have never had that experience, and part of you longs for it, even if you are not fully aware of that longing. Learning English gives you new ways to express these subtle emotional realities. It gives you phrases that can soften the edges of honesty, that allow you to be real without feeling exposed. You can say, "I've been carrying a lot lately," or "I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed," or "I'm not at my best today." These are not dramatic statements. They are gentle openings, small invitations for connection. And each time you practice them, whether out loud or in your mind, you are not just improving your language skills, you are practicing emotional awareness, self-compassion, and courage. You are training yourself to notice what you feel, to name it, and to let it exist in the world. Sometimes I think about how different my younger self's life might have been if he had known these phrases, if he had felt safe enough to use them. But I also believe that every stage of our life has its own language, its own rhythm, its own way of being. There is no need for regret. only for understanding and gentle growth. As we move through this reflection together, I want you to picture your own family, your own home, your own memories. Notice the moments when you stayed silent, and notice the reasons behind that silence. Was it love, fear, habit, protection? All of these can coexist, and none of them make you weak. I also want you to imagine what it might feel like, just once, to say something a little more honest than usual. Not everything, just one small truth. Maybe, "I've been feeling a bit stressed," or "I miss you," or "I've been thinking about home." Imagine how that might change the space between you and the other person, even slightly. And if the thought of that feels too heavy, that is okay. There is no rush. Your relationship with your feelings, with your family, with your voice is a journey, not a destination. You can take it at your own pace, just as you take your time with learning English. I return again to the idea that you are not just learning a language. You are learning how to live more consciously, more attentively, more honestly. Every new word you learn, every phrase you practice, becomes part of that larger process of becoming more fully yourself. As this quiet conversation between us continues, I sit with gratitude for all the moments of silence and all the moments of speech that have shaped who I am today. I am grateful for the kitchen table, for the stormy evening, for the late-night phone call, for standing beside my father in the afternoon sun. Each of these moments taught me something about love, language, and the courage to be seen. And I am grateful for you, for your willingness to listen, to reflect, to feel, to grow. Your journey with English is intertwined with your journey as a person, and that is what makes it so meaningful. So carry this theme gently with you, the things we do not say, the reasons we stay silent, and the quiet power of slowly finding our voice. Notice, breathe, reflect, and when you are ready, speak. Because your inner world deserves words, your heart deserves expression, and your story, in English and in life, deserves to be told. There is something tender about the way memories layer themselves over time, like transparent sheets placed gently one over another, each one slightly shaping how we see the whole. As I sit with you now, I notice how this theme of unspoken feelings does not live only in childhood or only in family homes. It follows us into adulthood, into friendships, into relationships, into workplaces, and even into our relationship with ourselves. I remember a quiet afternoon in my early years of teaching, sitting alone in an empty classroom after all the students had left. The desks were still arranged in neat rows, notebooks half open, a few pens forgotten on the floor. Sunlight slipped through the windows in soft rectangles, landing on the whiteboard where faint traces of English phrases remained. "How are you feeling today, I think? I feel, I believe." I sat at the teacher's desk, feeling both calm and strangely unsettled. That day, one of my students had spoken honestly for the first time. She was usually quiet, polite, always giving safe answers. But during a speaking activity, when I asked how she was really feeling about learning English, she hesitated, then said, in a low voice, "I feel very small when I speak, like my words do not belong to me." In that moment, the room felt very still. No one laughed. No one rushed to comfort her. The other students simply listened. And I remember how her eyes looked not weak, but deeply sincere, almost relieved to have said something true out loud. After class, I kept thinking about her words. I feel very small when I speak. I realized that this was not just about English. It was about how many people feel in their own lives, even in their native language, even with their own families, or to feel small, unseen, unheard, unsure. These are universal human experiences. And I thought about myself, about how many times I had felt that same smallness, but wrapped it in silence, in politeness, in "I'm fine." I saw more clearly than ever that learning to speak another language is often deeply emotional work. It stirs up old fears, old insecurities, old patterns of silence. I think of you again now, perhaps sitting somewhere far away, listening to this, carrying your own memories, your own hesitations, your own reasons for not speaking. Maybe you have felt small too. Maybe you have felt like your words did not quite fit, like they were not strong enough, clear enough, or good enough. If that is true, I want you to know something quietly, without pressure, without drama. That feeling does not mean you are small. It means you are sensitive. It means you care. It means you are paying attention to yourself and to others. There is another scene that comes to me, one from much later in my life, when I was no longer the boy at the kitchen table, but a man trying to understand his own heart more deeply. I was sitting in a small cafe one rainy afternoon, the kind of place with wooden tables, soft music, and the comforting smell of coffee and baked bread. Across from me sat a close friend, someone I had known for years. We had talked about many things over time: dreams, frustrations, memories, laughter. Yet, there were still parts of me I had never fully shared with him, parts I kept neatly folded away. That day, the rain fell steadily against the window, creating a gentle, rhythmic backdrop to our conversation. At some point, he looked at me and said, simply, "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know." His tone was not accusatory, just warm, perceptive, and kind. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, that subtle resistance that rises when vulnerability knocks at the door. For a moment, I wanted to brush it off, to laugh, to change the subject. But instead, I sat with his words, letting them sink in. Slowly, I said, "I think I've spent a long time trying to appear calm, even when I wasn't." Saying that out loud felt strange, almost foreign, like speaking a new language for the first time, but it also felt honest in a way I had not experienced before. He nodded, listening without interrupting. In that shared silence, I realized that telling the truth about your feelings does not make you weaker. In many ways, it makes you more real, more human, more present in your own life. As I reflect on all of this, I see how deeply intertwined our emotional lives are with our ability to speak, to name, to express. Silence can be protective, but it can also become a cage if we stay inside it too long. Language, when used gently and honestly, can be a key that slowly opens that door. In English, there is a phrase I have always loved: "I'm still processing." It is such a thoughtful, compassionate way of acknowledging your feelings without forcing clarity. It means, I don't have everything figured out yet, but I am paying attention. It is honest, patient, and kind to yourself. You might try that phrase one day, quietly, maybe just in your own mind at first. I'm still processing how I feel. Notice how it feels to say those words. Notice how they give you permission to be human, to be uncertain, to be in between. I imagine you moving through your life, practicing not only English sounds and sentences, but also this deeper, quieter practice of emotional awareness. Perhaps you sit with your family at dinner, listening more closely than before, noticing what is said and what is not said. Perhaps you feel your own emotions more clearly, without rushing to hide them. And maybe, slowly, you begin to share a little more. Not everything, not all at once. Just small truths, like gentle steps across a bridge you are still building. I missed you. I was worried. I've been feeling tired. Each phrase a small act of courage, each one strengthening your voice. I also want to gently remind you that you do not owe anyone full transparency. Your feelings are yours. You choose what to share, when to share it, and with whom. Honesty does not mean exposure. It means intention, awareness, and respect for your own boundaries. As this long reflection continues to flow, like a river carrying memories, thoughts, and emotions together, I return once more to that simple sentence that began all of this. I never tell my family how I really feel. For some, that sentence holds pain. For others, protection. For many, a mixture of both. But perhaps, through this conversation, that sentence can slowly shift, not into something perfect or absolute, but into something more open. Like, sometimes I don't tell my family how I really feel, but I am learning how. There is growth in that. There is gentleness. There is possibility. And you, listening now, are part of that same journey, not only with English, but with yourself. Each word you learn, each story you hear, each reflection you make, is shaping how you understand your inner world and how you express it. So as the night deepens or the day continues around you, carry this theme lightly in your heart. Notice your silence. Notice your words. Notice your breathing. Notice your feelings. And trust that, little by little, your voice will find its way. Because you are not just learning to speak English. You are learning to speak your truth in whatever language feels right, at whatever pace feels safe. This is English with Thomas. I'm Thomas. Keep speaking, keep growing, and keep trusting yourself.